click to start recording. Folks should see the little red dot, I think, appear there. And we will begin the meeting. So good evening and welcome to the West Seattle Transportation Coalition September virtual membership meeting. Today is September 24th, 2020, fourth Thursday of the month as typical for us. We've got a nice little assortment of an agenda tonight, mostly focused around bicycles and scooters and focusing on that for a change. But as always, we'll get updates on the West Seattle Bridge. We'll do welcome and introductions in a moment. We'll take a brief moment for the board to approve previous meeting minutes from last month. And then we'll get underway with our update, as always, from Heather Marks in the Seattle Department of Transportation. We will shift from that to one of her colleagues from SDOT to talk to us about scooter and bike share programs. And then we will have one of our local neighborhood residents from West Seattle Bike Connections share some of their thoughts on with regard to the City of Seattle's scooter and bike share programs and some of the concerns that the community has been raising. I don't think we have any critical old business. I didn't put it there. If we do later on in the agenda, I'll bring it up. And FYI, for those who are regular active members, we're going to take about 20 or 30 minutes at the end of the meeting for quasi-board discussion, but we're going to have it here because we're welcome all members to participate. We're going to have some discussion about making some changes to our legislative agenda, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a moment. So as we get underway, if folks are joining us for the first time, I just want to let you know the purpose of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is we work to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people currently living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula, or some would say island right now. And we accomplish this by securing support of the residents, engaging elected officials at all levels. If you were with us last month, for example, we had Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. We also had the current Port of Seattle Commission President Peter Steinbrook with us. We also partner with government agencies to do outreach, to learn more, to help educate everyone here in West Seattle about what's going on with transportation issues. And we engage with other community groups, businesses, special interest groups, and others. You can learn more on our website as well as on our Facebook page. Very briefly, our legislative priorities for 2020 were West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor. It's always been that since we started. And we've tacked on their detour routes, which is a big issue right now. We've got a strike through. One of the things we're looking at removing now is Highland Parkway traffic control. Not because we don't think Highland Park traffic issues are a concern anymore, but that was really specific to some key intersections which have been addressed. Thankfully, after many decades of requests, it only took the bridge going down to get that addressed. But we think the other traffic concerns are now kind of part of this broader West Seattle Bridge transportation corridor and detour routes. So we'll be talking a little later, as I said, about one or two items to replace that. We also have, as always, Sound Transit 3 plans for light rail to West Seattle. A general goal of improving transportation infrastructure to match Seattle's growth. And then two other projects we're keeping an eye on. The Delridge Way Multimodal Project and Rapid Ride H, which has a check mark because, as many know, it is quite a complex project that is currently underway. And then we've kind of unbolded and dropped to the bottom there the Fauntleroy Way Boulevard project, as that's on hold. As folks figure out some of these other items that are higher on the priority list. So for board members who have seen the minutes, I would entertain a motion to proceed with approving minutes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from August 20, was it the 27th?
I'll second it.
Sorry, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Um, let's try this one more time. So, introductions. We will skip past this. Normally we ask people to add some things into the chat window. If you need to be added to the West Seattle Transportation Coalition email list right now, since chat is disabled, you can send an email to info, I-N-F-O, at westseattletc.org. West Seattle TC. So a little bit of abbreviation on the end, but not the front. And our board member, John Wright, can get you added. For board members who are here, why don't we pause and do a quick introduction. We're going to move forward. I am going to unmute Heather and Christian and Madison. Heather, you should be able to unmute yourself. I apologize that we may have some inability to do some slides at the moment, but if you'd like to at least get underway and start talking a little bit,
Yeah,
let me see what I can manage here.
why don't I just tell you what I know without slides, just to reduce the opportunity for mischief. And I am sure there are things that I will leave out, and I know I can count on you to ask those questions. So usually we start out talking about what's happening on the bridge. Currently, Kramer North America is continuing with stabilization work, including carbon fiber reinforced polymer wrap. And they are beginning the process of attaching the brackets that will be necessary for external post-tensioning. They're working 6 days a week, with the exception of last week when they took a couple days off for air quality, which I'm sure we can all appreciate. And yesterday I had the opportunity to go take a tour of the top of the bridge with our friends from the Port of Seattle, Commissioner Steinbrook, and one of the commissioners from the Port of Tacoma came along with. It was pouring rain, but I think we all found that being physically present with other people was made up for that. In terms of on the ground, you all know that we've made many hundreds of improvements all around West Seattle. What we're looking forward to the most coming up is an improvement to Highland Parkway and West Marginal Way. Changing that channelization so there is a right-only turn westbound to northbound from Highland Parkway onto, I'm looking up because I'm picturing the map in my mind. Onto West Marginal Way, and then there will be 2 through lanes westbound across the intersection. We think that that is going to increase the capacity of those 2 movements by about 20%. And we believe that the improvements that we made to the 5-way intersection, combined with the improvements that we are now making to Highland Parkway, may help flow on West Marginal Way, which I know is on everybody's mind. In addition, we're going to be installing radar speed signs that we have found help mitigate people's desire to speed. And then just a note, because speeding is a choice that individual people make. I just want to remind everybody that going the speed limit is actually really important, whether or not you agree with it. And that the more we slow ourselves down, this actually improves throughput. So let's see, the next thing that we like to talk about is community. We are just about to have some community conversations about changes that we're pondering to improve freight mobility on the West Marginal Way corridor, as well as connect an important piece of the Duwamish Trail that doesn't have that connection right now. What else is happening? Madison, can you think of anything that I should be saying that I'm not saying right now? I usually can do these things. I usually can do these things from memory, but it has been a really intense week. Has it been okay for you guys? It's been a lot.
Madison needs to be unmuted.
Sorry, what?
Madison needs to be
Oh, thank
unmuted.
you. Madison, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I was talking to myself. Home zones, I don't know. Heather, you.
Oh, home zones, right. So we are engaged right now in some really good conversations with folks, particularly in Highland Park, South Park, and Georgetown, about home zones, which are, instead of just taking corridors and slowing down corridors, it's a way to take a whole geographic area to do traffic calming. And so we expect to have plans for all of those neighborhoods actually here toward the end of the month. So I think we're getting pretty close. We're also putting together our implementation plan for the rest of this year, and then the projects that we are going to do next year. I just want to gently remind everybody that the pandemic has had a wide impact on all of us, but particularly on people who can't work from home. And some of those people who can't work from home work for SDOT. And so we have actually significantly less crew capacity at this moment than we typically have. And so it's taking us a little longer to do things that we used to be able to do really quickly. Anything else, Madison?
Madison, do you want to talk about how you and Adonis dropped off Vision Zero signs for community?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, today I dropped off some for Dumar Way and then some on Delridge. So you'll start seeing more of those up in the neighborhoods, and we're dropping off some more either tomorrow or next week. So, and we have some extras if there's a desire to have more.
And we have translated Vision Zero signs that was community requests. So if you guys need anything translated, let us know. We have them in Spanish, Khmer, Somali. Is there another language I'm missing? I think I am.
Vietnamese, I think I still have.
Vietnamese, yeah.
Okay. Hey, for a really exciting moment, perhaps we could ask some questions.
Yes. Well, so we had a couple of questions for you. Can you talk a little bit more about what's up with the Reconnect West Seattle bicycle projects? And can you explain a little more about this proposal for a northbound freight lane on West Marginal Way, which the Port of Seattle does not seem to be particularly keen on, as well as a bike lane, which the bike community doesn't seem particularly keen on. So why exactly is SDOT looking at this?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure it's true to say that the bike community isn't keen on it. It was, in fact, the 4th ranked bike project in the surveys that we did. But we are talking with folks, and we had some surprising feedback yesterday. I know that lots of folks, particularly Allie Thompson and Paulina Lopez, were thrilled with the bike connection, as well as Jolene Haas. But the Peter Goldmans of the world seem maybe a little less excited. So we haven't decided to do those things. If we do decide to do those things, it will all be in conjunction with installing the traffic signal that will allow a crossing for the longhouse. And to the extent that you have input about that bike lane, we'd sure love to hear it. The port is not the only freight constituent that we talk to. And in fact, the idea of the northbound FAB lane, freight and business access lane, came from businesses on the riverside of West Marginal Way. They are having a hard time getting out of their driveways. And so we are talking with all of those folks, and if there are changes that we can make that are less than a dedicated lane, we are absolutely willing to do that. That's why we aren't doing those things this year. We're waiting until next year to do that stuff. The Reconnect West Seattle Bike Project, that's maybe broad enough that I don't know if I can. We're doing some this year and doing some next year. What are there specific questions?
So is part of the problem with getting in and out of driveways there the fact that we're not enforcing the lower speed limit currently on West Marginal Way?
No, I mean, I think part of the problem is volume. It's hard to, you know, Michael, we are taking feedback from the Riverside businesses, and they are telling us that some kind of treatment that allowed them to enter traffic more predictably and come up to speed more predictably would be helpful to them. We are not committed to doing a dedicated lane for freight. There are some things that we can do that are maybe short of that, including additional signage and cross-hatching out driveways so that when people are stopped in the street, they're not parked across driveways. Like I said, we haven't decided on either of these things. We do have data that demonstrates that neither of these treatments increase average travel time by anything more than a few seconds. And we're also seeing that the level of service for all of the traffic signals remains at A. And so that's pretty good. So we, you know, you don't like level of service A there, Mark Jacobs?
It does. You're basically not telling the truth. Those intersections are F.
Well,
the signalized intersection West Marginal Way, or are you talking about the driveway intersections?
No, I'm talking about the signalized intersections that we measured, Mark, and I don't appreciate being called a liar.
Not operating a level of service A.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
not.
All right.
And further,
That's play nice, Mark.
Yeah, we have the data, so I'm not 100% sure how that stacks up against observation, but we do have the data, which we'd be happy to share.
I've only done thousands of calculations, and I'll tell you they're not level of service A.
All right, Mark. Thanks.
Do we have folks who've
I'm
got
an expert. I'll try and be nice, but you're speaking to an expert, and I don't think SDOT is acting like experts following the data. The speed limit, for example.
Yeah, we have the same qualifications that you do. So thank you very much for your input.
Have the same you yourself do not have the qualifications I do.
We SDOT certainly do. Thank you.
Play nice, Mark.
I know, but she's frustrated.
I think what I would say, Heather, is SDOT has demonstrated repeatedly that we are quite willing as a city to make decisions that are not called for by the data, but that are political decisions. And the Transportation Coalition is on record many times saying that's fine, but the city needs to own up to it when they're making political decisions.
Yeah,
and not
I totally
data-based.
agree with you. I totally agree with you, Michael. In this case, this is a data-based decision, meaning we have examined what these changes will do to the traffic, what they will do to travel time, and what they will do to level of service on the signalized intersections that we have tested. That is not the only way that we make decisions. In this case, that is the data. I am not saying that that is forcing our decision. I'm just saying that people who are apprehensive.
Data does not support you, Heather.
Hold on, Mark, let her finish.
Mark, if you have the data, I would be much more willing to listen to your opinion. We'd be happy to send it to you. So what I am saying is that the bicycle project was the 4th rated project in the in the survey. So I don't know what to say about that. That is information that we got from the community. And we are trying to respond to the needs of the businesses on the riverside. As I have said a couple of times now, we are not committed to doing a freight lane northbound, and we are absolutely willing to hear other ideas, including from the port and from the businesses who are on the riverside of West Marginal Way. Thanks.
Quick question. Did I miss, have you already covered the Duwamish Longhouse issue?
You missed lots of fun things, Marty.
Yeah.
Marty, what we are going to, we have funded the signal there at the Longhouse, and we're going to be installing that as soon as we can. We're estimating that it won't be until mid next year. We have some important permitting that has to happen with our friends at Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, and they aren't always in as big a hurry as we are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So can I jump in here, Michael?
Yes, and if other folks have questions, we recognize about 98% of you. So if there are other folks who have questions, just raise your hand and we can unmute you.
So Heather, one of my volunteer jobs is with NOAA with seal sitters. And I want to thank the people at Safe Streets, because Constellation, the roadway in front of Constellation Park, is blocked off now, but we got permission to go in with our equipment when we have marine life on the shore. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh,
Because that's a big deal to be able to take our equipment in there, park our car, and get our equipment down onto the beach. So
well, you're very welcome.
yeah, well, it was a big deal for all of our volunteers because we're struggling right now with COVID as well. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the other thing I have a question about is, we've talked about Highland Park and those neighborhoods, which is critical, but I live down by Fauntleroy, and I've noticed that because of the 2 stop signs and most of the traffic in the morning now is taking a right turn, it's really backing up. Are there plans to maybe take out that second stop sign that's 100 feet from the other one there on Brace Point and Wildwood to kind of get that traffic moving through a little better?
You know, I live in Fauntleroy, and I'm familiar with that intersection. That is a really strange and complicated place. I don't know what our plans are there, but I would be happy to ask. And I know that Madison is good at taking these things down, and so I'll take it back to our engineers and ask them if they have plans. Thank you, though, for bringing that up, Victoria. That's a great question.
I can offer some perspective on it. When we redesigned the triangle, when FCA worked with SDOT to redesign the triangle, Dong Ho wanted to remove the stop sign at the top of the triangle on the east end, and we fought to keep it because we got a turn lane right in front of it onto 44th. So without a restructure of that intersection that warns the westbound people coming from California onto Brace Point, heading for the point of the triangle, without some kind of structure that tells them that the traffic is going to come straight up instead of stop at the top of the triangle, I think we're going to be in the same situation we were before we were designed, which was a lot of near misses and some T-bones.
Yeah, it's a very complicated, unfortunate geometry there.
Well, I've been watching it, Marty, and I would tell you that I'm seeing a lot of people run that second stop sign. And because it's one way, nobody could take a right turn at that second stop. They can only go left, and people coming down the hill can't go straight. They have to turn. So I'm not certain what benefit it is anymore. I understand when it was originally analyzed, but now it doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, I'm talking about the downhill folks making left turns onto 44th and heading up the hill there. We'd probably have to look at how many people actually slow down there to make that turn. Maybe it's an insignificant number and it won't make any difference to pull the stop sign.
Okay. Well, if we could just look at it.
Yeah, Victoria, I'd be very, very happy to have them take a look at that. Thank you. All right. So have we flogged West Marginal Way enough? Are there more questions there? It would probably be beneficial, Michael, perhaps if for next month's meeting, we had Sarah Zora come and speak to the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. She can bring a presentation that has all the data and can receive your input there. She's our new mobility manager for the West Seattle Bridge Safety Program. Does that sound like a thing that you might be interested in?
We were happy to feature anyone from your team you would like, and I believe you've promised to bring an engineer.
Oh yeah.
So,
make a note.
yeah.
No, do you know who will bring? We'll send. Maybe we'll send an engineer with Sarah to answer some of the more technical questions.
So I've turned on the chat window for folks. I think we've got an eye on things, and I see, I guess we're not done with West Marginal Way. I see a question came in from Richard. Why has the speed limit on West Marginal Way been reduced to 25?
For exactly the same reason that we have reduced speeds all over the city and on arterials. Vision Zero is a value of the department. The mayor made an announcement at the end, I think, of last year, and we have started moving forward with that. There is also data that shows that lower speeds lead to fewer fatal and serious accidents, and that's important for us. By accidents, I mean collisions. Sorry. I'll get in Vision Zero trouble. What do you got, Marty?
Two questions there. The first is, do you have data supporting the difference between 30 and 25? And second, is that reduction of 25 and the backups that are caused in the detours leading to a lot of side street bypassing and speeding?
Not on West Marginal Way.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of 35th and I'm thinking of 16th.
We aren't hearing any abnormal levels of complaints for cut through traffic. So I haven't heard any of that.
Okay.
That's usually how we gauge that, when people complain that people are cutting through their neighborhoods.
Okay.
I'm just good. Marty did it. Sorry, go ahead.
And the difference between 25 and 30 is negligible or significant?
Well, it's significant if you're the human that's getting hit by the car.
I've seen little graphics, I think SDOT has shared at some meeting showing the differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm watching Lovecraft Country, so I have to put off watching your video until I'm done with that series.
Okay. Fair enough.
Heather, do you want to remind folks or share with them about what the SDOT's doing on the Low Bridge and the committee that's been formed?
Yes. Yeah, is it? Okay.
I think so. There's a lot of people interested.
We have
motorcyclists and others.
Yeah, the motorcyclists are out of luck for the same reason that I've been saying since the very beginning. But yes, we have formed a subcommittee of the task force that is going to be helping us navigate a more dynamic policy once we are able to implement automated enforcement. Automated enforcement is going to allow us to be much more finely grained in how many cars we allow through at certain times of the day. And so, for example, we hear a lot from folks who have critical medical conditions that they need to get to, say, Cancer Care Alliance at a certain time for an infusion. And that is, that's crushing for us to hear about, and also extremely difficult to administer. So being able to have a more finely grained enforcement mechanism, as well as a task force that can help us figure out how to equitably administer that, because the way to be equitable about that is not say to ask folks to present Heather with their doctor's note, right? So, and so, it's not funny at all, sorry. And so this subgroup is going to help us come up with a more dynamic policy to go along with our automated enforcement.
One other question about the low bridge.
Yeah.
About its capacity, its weight-bearing its volume capacity, its weight-bearing capacity, and repairs were announced. How are those repairs going? And when we first got the West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor designated, repairs on the low bridge were one of the one of the boxes to check in 2015 or 2016. So were those repairs done under these new repairs, or these repairs?
So something to really understand about the low bridge, and let's talk about it structurally for a moment, and then we can talk about capacity. The low bridge hasn't changed. What has changed are the federal standards that determine its capacity, right? It's structural capacity, right? And so the bridge hasn't changed. Same bridge, nothing's changed. What's different is the rules that govern it. And so because of those rules, we had to do a load rating for the bridge. This is, by the way, how we discovered what was happening with the high bridge too, just FYI. So when we did the load rating, we found that, whoa, we got to close that thing right away. But so we did live load testing, which is where you run a truck of a specified weight over the bridge at a certain speed, and it measures how things jiggle. This is the very technical way to talk about it. And we just,
I like jiggle.
Yeah, and we discovered that per the new rules, it doesn't do so well. However, we were able to work with FHWA, the Federal Highways Administration, as well as WSDOT, and they both have input into this. And we're able to address those deficiencies administratively until we can get the fix designed and installed. And so we are in the process right now of designing the fix, which is probably going to involve carbon fiber reinforced polymer. And then we have to obviously implement that. Compared to the high bridge, the price tag is tiny. It's like $10 million. I know for my budget, $10 million is a lot, but for fixing bridges, it's not very much at all. And we have Kramer North America can move over to work on that bridge. So so that stuff is underway. It is nothing that you should be concerned about. The very largest trucks, the over legal 2 size trucks, are not allowed to go on it. And we've worked with all the businesses that run trucks that size to help them find an appropriate detour. In terms of traffic capacity, we have determined that the number of cars per hour that can use the low bridge without impeding emergency access is 450. So, right. So since right now we can only enforce it when we have police officers, right? There's this whole chunk of the middle of the day where there is excess capacity on the low bridge, but we can't control it, right? So we can't just say anybody use it, because we will definitely soar above 450 an hour, and we will have backups from I-5 all the way to the junction. So with automated enforcement and some administrative mechanisms that allow us to keep that level of traffic below where we're going to impact emergency services is what we're headed for in this group that Deb asked me to speak about. Does that make sense?
And Heather, I see Tracy from the West Seattle blog asked in the chat, do we have a new estimated date for when a camera installation will occur?
And I don't know that off the top of my head, though I do know the legislation that the city council has to pass in order for us to move forward is on the docket for next week, Tuesday, I think.
At council or committee?
It's council, and there's a reason for it, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay.
I know it was a weird day. I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Yom Kippur.
Unless there's
Yes,
one last
that
question.
is what it is, Yom Kippur.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
exactly what it
there we
is.
go.
I've got a bikey question.
All right. And then as soon as Kate asks her question, we will move on to our next guest.
Fantastic.
East Marginal Way, I believe, didn't get the funding from the federal government. Is there a
It
plan
didn't.
B?
Punt. That's not a plan. I'm sure that there is another plan. I just don't know what it is. So Madison will write that down and we'll get that back to you. In fact, it will be great when Sarah comes to this meeting next month, because she will be able to speak to you about both East Marginal Way as well as West Marginal Way.
Okay,
That's right in
you.
her wheelhouse. You're very welcome.
Marty, I'm going to move on to keep us going. And,
Just
you
to
know,
follow our community-
Heather's always back. We can always ask
Right.
Heather follow-up questions.
I'll send you the note offline.
All right, yeah,
Um,
Marty. I was going to say, Marty, you know how to get in touch with me. You guys, I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of your next guest. You know how to get in touch with me if you have questions.
Perfect.
All right.
So
All right, thanks, team.
Madison, I've made you a co-host, so you should be able to share out slides. Annotation should be off, so we shouldn't have any additional problems there. And Stefan, you should be able to unmute yourself now. So hopefully this will all work going forward. I see slides. That's a good sign.
You got me?
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefan Winkler. I work both in supporting micromobility, specifically scooter share, of course, bike share, and also TDM side of West Seattle TDM. So, Madison, if you go ahead and go to the next slide. Today, what I'd like to do is sort of walk you through sort of a background. I'm pretty sure most of y'all know what scooters are, but you never know coming into a room. And then sort of some of the pilot opportunities that we see and why we're doing this now, as well as the challenges that we're facing and the strategies that we have to overcome those challenges. And then sort of the end result right now at this point, which is, you know, the vendors that we selected and the funding behind the program and what that's, where that's going. So as you can see here on the screen, we have standing scooters and seated scooters. Majority of folks, when they think of scooters, think of the standing ones, which we see all over the media. In different cities. You possibly have ridden some. You see them in West Seattle, probably in certain places, definitely other parts of, well, in White Center, that's for sure, because that's where Lime is at. Lime launched there first. So right now we only have one company here that's doing that at this moment, and that's Lime. And then we also have seated scooters. And so this permit allows for both types to enter into the city. They're both free floating, meaning that they operate in the same way that bike share does. They don't, you know, they lock to themselves. They travel at no more than 15 miles per hour, and they must be parked in, you know, on the paid furniture zone or bike racks or corrals. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So before we got to this point, if you've been following the saga, it's been quite long actually. I'd say that the mayor sort of presented to the city more than a year ago that the city would, you know, try this out, you know, scooters, and since then we have been looking at lessons that we've learned from bike share. We've been researching peer cities such as Portland and a lot of other, San Francisco, other cities up and down the West Coast and over on the East Coast, such as Washington, D.C., seeing how they've been running their programs. We engaged with over 30 regional stakeholders, surveyed over 750 Seattleites. We filed a SEPA determination of non-significance, which is sort of the environmental review. It was appealed. We defended it successfully. Legislation was just recently passed. We've evaluated vendors. There's a number of submissions. There's 9. And we have now finally issued at least 1 permit, and we've selected 2 other companies who are first in line to be issued 2 more permits. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So why now? Next slide. There's a few different reasons. One of the more important ones is what we're facing here in West Seattle, which is what we're here to talk about this evening, which is just with the bridge being down and with the survey results that we've gotten back. We've learned from those survey results that 40% of survey respondents would use transit if it were more accessible. Scooters and bikes can help sort of connect that first mile or last mile. We're also looking at just increasing the number of bikes and scooters that can be within the area and service the community. And we're also looking to partner with what's already happening down in White Center with King County in that area. The bike and scooter vendors that presented proposals to us, they all had to give us a plan as it relates to how or what they would bring to the West Seattle area. They couldn't just come in and say, no, we're not going to touch West Seattle. West Seattle was a core area that we wanted to focus on. So part of our mitigation process will be, among other things, bringing micromobility to the area in a way that will help decrease the amount of car traffic moving around the area and over the bridge. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The other issue that we're dealing with now is COVID-19, obviously. Folks at this point are still a little nervous to get onto transit, and probably will be this way for a little bit longer, even after we begin to open up. What we've found when we've talked with other cities that have scooter share programs in place, when we've looked at their data, is that, for instance, in Portland and Detroit and Baltimore, they've reported that they're seeing rides that are 2 times longer than they were prior to COVID. And that they're also, they're seeing that they're ending up at like grocery stores and, hospitals, just, different things like that being used by essential workers. And so that tells us that folks are using it not just to kind of joyride around or to replace a pedestrian trip, but that they're actually using them to get around, and they're finding them to be very useful during this period in which we need more physical distance between each other when we travel. Another thing that we're seeing is that there's a 46% increase in ridership in areas that are lower income communities during this period. I think that's coming out of Portland with the data that we saw from there. And we're just seeing in general across some of our peer cities, such as Los Angeles and Atlanta and Austin, that even though there is sort of a stay-at-home order in place during some of these months, there's a continued increase. And as you can see there on the screen, in July, scooter trips were up, and people were using them as a way to get around because they did not feel comfortable on transit. So it just provides another option, since there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to be uncomfortable possibly going back to bus and transit. Go ahead and show the next slide, please. And, you know, really more importantly, I would say that the elephant in the room that we've sort of, in some cases, except for the last couple of weeks, have forgotten about with all of the sort of chaos that we've been living amongst. You know, we're continuing to warm our world with carbon emissions. And so we see scooters as a way to decrease that. Historically, from what we're seeing, scooters are replacing 25% of car trips in certain cities. We're seeing that Fear and Peers did a study, and based on if we were to put a fleet of, let's say, 75, we just pick that number as a round number, a 7,500 fleet within Seattle, we would be seeing that scooters could replace up to 175,000 car trips per month and reduce CO2 emissions up to 85 metric tons. So, you know, this is the direction that we're wanting to go in. And the final thing is, you know, all of the vendors that we have evaluated and that we have selected as being vendors to operate in Seattle, they had to show that they would show their vehicle miles traveled for their operational processes, so that we can actually track whether their operational aspects are adding, you know, carbon to the environment or not. So that's something that we're going to be tracking along with the life cycle of the devices also. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I'm sure we're all aware of, and then the strategies that the permit has been we've put within the permits to address these challenges. So one of the main priorities of our permit is to ensure pedestrian safety. So currently, the SMC code does not allow, well, I'm not going to say currently because it was just changed, but prior to it being changed, it did not allow scooters on the sidewalk, and it still will not allow scooters on the sidewalk. It will allow, and this is where the change comes in, it will allow scooters to be ridden in other areas such as in bike lanes and on the streets that are 25 miles per hour and under. There's been some pushback and on like why we're not allowing them to ride on sidewalks when, for instance, bicycles are allowed to ride on sidewalks. And in addition, why are we not allowing scooters to ride on sidewalks in certain areas of the city where, let's say, there's just not very good infrastructure to support it? And that is something that, yeah, that is something that we've heard a lot of pushback on, both now and when we were doing our, you know, engagement with folks in the communities. But on the other side of that, what we also got was a lot of pushback from folks who were just not wanting to see another device on the sidewalk, and who were in a way just really going to the map. And I would say, you know, a lot of pedestrian advocates, folks with disabilities, who were very concerned about not, you know, sort of feeling like there was a target on their back, and just, you know, we're really caught in the middle there. And so while we recognize fully that it's not an ideal solution, we chose to, for now, just not change that. Just leave it to where scooters are not allowed on sidewalks. So I just want to give a little bit of background on that, because I know that that's been a point of you know, difference with different folks, and definitely see both sides of that. Scooters will continue to park just like they do with bikes and furniture zones and bike racks. We'll continue to build corrals. As we did last year, we'll have certain areas that are considered geofenced, where there's no parking there because of the amount of traffic that's in the area. And we're going to be including a certain amount of new type of an education that's both within the app. So for instance, you'll see there's an example there in the photo And this is actually a photo that is a technology that we'll be using here to determine if folks are actually parking correctly. At the end of the ride, folks will be required to take a picture of where they park. And then within our audits, if we find that there's scooters that are misparked, we'll then be fining people. Now we've had the ability to decrease fleet size in the past with bikes, but what we learned from bike share is that didn't really do much. And so in this permit, we're allowing, we have the ability to both fine the vendor as well as riders. And I just want to state, from an equity standpoint, we're very sensitive to, the sensitivity in terms of around how we need to handle that. We're not saying that we're demanding that vendors that they find folks on the first time, or that they don't find other ways. For instance, with folks that are on low-income programs, there are other ways to deal with that, where they will receive a number of warnings and then eventually be locked out. This is really kind of pointed at folks who are just really more as a learning tool and as a what's the right, sort of almost like a propaganda tool, where you find out your friend just got fined for parking and showed through the parking picture that they didn't park it correctly, so they get the fine. That sort of messaging spreads. Folks begin to kind of think before they end their ride, and be understanding that they may get fined if they're not parking correctly. In addition to that, we've integrated into Find It, Fix It, a way to report, which we didn't have before. It's just something that we just released, say, several months ago. And so folks who come across bikes or scooters that are misparked will no longer need to fumble around and try to find the number on that particular device to see, oh, well, where's their number at? Who do I report it to? They'll just be able to either to just call 684 road number, or to use the Find It, Fix It app. And we've even worked closely with folks from the blind, folks who are blind, Lighthouse for the Blind, and Rooted in Rights worked with us on finding a way that for folks who cannot see can also report things. And so we'll have Braille on each one of these devices, so they come across something, they know that there's one spot that they can touch, they can report it. They don't need to take a picture. Their phone grabs the location that they're at and they just send it to us. So we've really tried to make sure that we've done that in a way that's equitable with folks who have access issues. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So this is kind of touching on what I just touched on a little bit earlier in terms of where we can ride. Again, not allowed to ride on sidewalks unless that sidewalk is a connection where and part of a bike network. So I think, for instance, on the Fremont Bridge, I think that's an example of a place. Also going along the, of course, going along the bridges from West Seattle on the lower bridge. Also be able to ride on roads that are within 25 miles per hour or less, and will be allowed in bike lanes and public paths. Top speed will be 15 miles per hour, unless it's your first ride. So one thing that we learned from looking at some of the data coming out of, there's been about 2 strong studies, one out of Austin, one out of Portland, that we looked at, and we really kind of looked at the data to kind of understand like where and how people are getting hurt when they're riding scooters. And there seems to be a majority of folks falling down or falling off during their first few rides. Which I'm assuming, I know, you try something new, you make mistakes. I fell off my bike when I was learning how to ride a bike when I was a kid. And I've actually I've tried all these scooters, and I've noted that some of them, you just stand on it, you push down the button, and boy, it just takes off like right away. And if you don't have it turned correctly, you could go flying into a car, or if you have balance issues. So that was something that was important to us, and that we implemented to where it's required that if this is your first ride, the app will require you to kind of take a slower ride, sort of like a learning, to kind of learn how to handle it. And I believe the vendors will also allow for the folks that say, you know what, I really don't want to ride any faster than this. I just want to kind of keep it here because I'm feeling a little, I don't really trust myself, to go any faster than this. Then there's a way to kind of cap it at that. And I think that's something that some of the vendors will do. We're also going to be enhancing sort of our education and enforcement. I talked about sort of what we're doing in terms of enforcing parking. We'll also be enforcing and educating around and how to ride, going into communities. Also with the app itself, looking at having folks take a test or a quiz before they actually ride it, to show that they understand the rules of the road, that they understand where to park, that they understand where they can and can't ride. And this will kind of pop up whenever they get onto the device randomly, so that they don't just take it once, swipe through it on the first time. Yeah, I accept, I agree. I'll give away my whole life. Just let me onto the thing. It'll be something that'll pop up each time, just to make sure it's an incentive reminder. And then as it relates to helmets, you'll see there's a picture there of black helmet there. And first photo of before we got into the section of the scooters that looked like sit-down scooters, and they're spread out on the street. It was within the slide deck. That company is called Wheels, and it's one of the companies that we actually chose. And one of the reasons we chose them, among others, was that they have each device, and they're a seated company, each device has a helmet that is part of the device. And it basically the back of the device opens up, and the helmet comes out, and inside of the helmet is a sort of like a biodegradable liner with a little tab that you can pull out and get rid of that first liner, and then you can use it without putting the same thing on your head that someone else did before you. Now, is that a perfect solution? No. But I mean, it's the most innovative kind of one that we've seen. And that's what we were looking for when we were evaluating vendors. We were looking at other ways that vendors were doing it. That was the only company that did something like that. The other vendors were doing like where you take a picture with the helmet on your head to show that you're actually wearing a helmet, and then you get a discount on that ride. And of course, we want to be able to track not only success through the metrics, but also injury rates. And so we're partnered with the University of Washington and Harvard U on a study on how, what a safety study around the use of scooters. And we're really more interested in not just doing a safety study to see if folks are falling down or getting hurt. People are going to fall down and get hurt. That's not a surprise, because anytime someone does something for the first time, you make mistakes. It's not a surprise when you see that there's a study that comes out. It's like, oh, there's no scooters in this city, and now there's scooters in this city, and there's some people who are going to the hospital because they fell down. That's to be expected. It happens with every new mode. What we really want to understand is how are the strategies that we've put into place impacting our pilot compared to other cities, and what are the differences between the different modes. Most of these studies that we've read are pretty simple, and they're not necessarily looking at the difference between seated devices and standing devices. And we're really interested to know which one seems safer here in Seattle. Is there going to be a difference? So we want to kind of dig into that data. So really interested in what's going to come out of that. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So, when we talk about this, in the back of everyone's head, they're like, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable on transit, and I don't know that I feel comfortable on touching a device after someone. Get it. And that's why we're going to have specific processes and procedures that are within the permit that are required of each vendor in terms of sanitizing each device. In fact, one of the devices, and it was the one that I told you about that has the helmet wheels, they actually have the handlebars and the brake levers that are like antibacterial. I can't think of the right word. It's like this the name of this type of technology is slipping my mind, but basically it's it sort of releases this sort of stuff that kind of kills, germs and stuff like that. And so these companies are trying to be innovative in approaching how they're keeping the public safe. And beyond that, we're expecting them to sanitize each device every time that they touch it, service it in any way, that they're educating their staff on best, safe practices, whether it's their direct staff or whether they're contractors, and that they're implementing anything that we require of them as it relates to COVID-19 precautions as new, evidence comes out. So that's something that we're going to be paying very close attention to. Next slide, please. So, another thing that we really would like to see is more participation, more ridership in communities communities of equity in our environmental justice communities. The previous bike share permit that we had in place basically mapped out certain areas of the city that were required to have distribution. And what we learned from that is that that wasn't enough. Like just mapping out an area and saying, okay, you need to put your devices here, just wasn't enough. We weren't really seeing the sort of uptake from the community that we wanted to see. We weren't seeing the uptake in the low-income programs that were put into place, or the low barrier plans that allowed for folks to use things other than smartphones and credit cards. So for this permit for both bike share and scooter share, we're tracking not only whether there's a certain 10% distribution, but also measuring the number of trips that are starting in those communities and ending in those communities. We will take in our hands, because prior we were sort of leaving it in the hands of the vendors to like, okay, put these, have a low income plan, have a low barrier plan, and distribute these devices in certain areas, and then expecting that the rest would take care of itself in a way, or that they would promote it, and that just wasn't the case. So in this case, we're going to be going into communities, engaging, working with DON and working with different liaisons that we have in the community to make sure that folks are aware of this. And one specific area that we're really interested in, this kind of applies to where we are right now in our history with COVID-19, is folks that are who have no choice to be out there. A lot of us, we can work from home, but there's a lot of folks out there that have to go into work. A lot of them are essential workers that are working in lower income, lower hourly jobs, such as care facilities and grocery stores. And so we're going to kind of also focus on folks that are in these types of jobs, making sure that they're aware of these programs and understanding whether these programs are impacting, bringing value to their life, and are they writing them, and what we can learn from that. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit now about program funding and selected vendors. So the permit fees, it's $150 per device. And to start with, each company, and there's 3 companies that were awarded, and I'll get to who those were in a moment. But we're starting out at $500 per company. Right now, the only company that's here is Lime. I believe at this point they do have 500, but really we want to kind of like, we don't want to just like unleash a ton of devices on the street right away. We want to make sure that we're watching whether they can deliver what they're saying in terms of adhering to whatever requirements are in terms of parking, in terms of meeting the needs that we've outlined for the city. So that will probably stay at around a 500 per company till around the end of the year. There's not going to be a ton of ridership through the cold, dark months, more than likely. And then as we get into next year, start allowing folks who have passed the test, so-called, who have been good cooperative vendors with the city and are fulfilling the metrics that we've set, we'll be allowing them to start scaling up to a total of, for each vendor, 2,000. And like I said earlier, that's $150 per device that'll be charged. Those funding fees are going to fund things like, program implementation, management of it, increased parking in certain areas, our Outdoors for All partnership, which has been a great success, that we funded with our, last year with bike share as well. That was really important to continue doing that, with our equity outreach and education. And then also that study that I talked about earlier with the University of Washington and Harvey View, that's going to have to be paid for out of that funding. So none of it's coming out of tax dollars or anything like that. It's all being funded by these fees. Next page, please. Okay, so here's our selected vendors. Before I get into them and kind of give you a little bit of background onto them, kind of give you a sense of the evaluation criteria that we went through and sort of the process. We selected these vendors through a panel. Were taken from various sort of expertise areas. We had folks who are on the panel that have a race and social justice on the RSJI change team at SDOT, so that's sort of the equity focus. Others who come from focused on ADA compliance. There's some folks on there from our policy and planning and projects, and then of course our micromobility team. And then we aggregated all of those scores. Some of it was quantitative, some of it was qualitative, and we graded essentially these 5 areas: equipment and safety, their parking plan, their operational plan, and including an operational plan involved things such as their education plans. It's bath time, you can hear it, right? Their education plans, their equity plan, what they plan to do here in West Seattle, and their helmets, right? And then their data compliance, where they're able to meet the data compliance, that the data requirements that we have in terms of collecting data, and, on not only just trips and stuff like that, but also on things like VMT, and then compliance. And the compliance one was interesting because it's something I have to say that Seattle really had approached this a little differently than most other cities. Most other cities sort of put out sort of like either an open-ended sort of an RFQ where there's it's more like folks are just the vendors are putting in sort of this this brochure of information. It's like very nicely polished and all, but sort of just answering some general questions. And it's really difficult. You can pretty much say whatever you want within those. It's very difficult to say, well, what's going to happen when you arrive, right? So you have to find ways to determine what the past was, where their past referrals from. And most cities, that's an area where it's difficult to measure. So what we did is sort of set up a situation to where we said, listen, we basically have 2 questions. We really wanted to ask them more than 2 questions, but we wanted these to be questions that there's no wiggling around within it, and it would tell us whether this was going to be a good partner or a bad partner. And those 2 questions were, in all the cities that you've been in that are over 200,000 in terms of population, did how many did you not have permission? Like how many did you rogue launch in? And we put a date as of June 2018. The reason I put that date is because before June 2018, this market was like a new market. There's a lot of sort of, breaking open of the markets, a lot of crazy stuff happening. But after June 2018, everyone who was in this industry should have known better. You should not be rogue launching. And it's okay to say that you rogue launched. We just want to know about it. And if we found out that you lied or you didn't tell us the truth, then we could either disqualify you, or we would just we would remove like a significant amount of points there. And then the other question was, were you asked at any point by this city to leave because of compliance issues? And the same grading curve. And so we released this to all the competitors, which there was 9, and said, hey, this is what your competing vendors are saying. And so grade each other's work, help us out here. And we also went to the NAPSA, which is and asked, what information are they getting. We validated it with different cities in terms of the information they were seeing there. And that also helped us kind of validate where folks were standing. So we felt really strong about when we finally came down to these 3 companies, that we made a good solid choice based on everything that we could determine here. So let me just talk quickly through like what we're seeing here. We've got Lime. We all know who they are. They were chosen because they have committed to bike share, and that's really important. We want to make sure we keep bike share here. And we graded them along with everyone else, and they met our exceeded what our minimum requirements were. The seated vendor, we wanted at least one seated vendor. Remember, I told you earlier, we wanted to be able to compare what's the difference between seated, especially here in Seattle. We want to see what happens with bigger wheels, lower center of mass or gravity, however you want to look at it. So the device that looks like a little bike is actually a scooter. You can stand on the pedals if you want to, but it's designed to be seated on as well. And so that was our first selection for the seated permit. And then the final one was Link, which is a standing device. A lot of really cool technology, really robust device. It was sort of a merger between a company called Zaxter and Super Pedestrian. Just really had some great plans. They actually even said that when they first come here to Seattle, they plan on putting all 500 of their devices focusing in on West Seattle to help us with the problem here. So that's sort of the rundown on, in general, the scooter share. Feel free to hurl your questions my way, and I'll do my best to answer.
All right, we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions before I'd like to slot in our other guest, who's also going to be offering some comments on bikes. If folks would like to chat, put questions in the chat window, or raise your hand. Kate can read out your questions, or we can unmute you to speak.
And we do have a couple comment questions in the chat already. One comment to keep motorized scooters and bikes off the sidewalks, but pedal-powered bikes on sidewalks are okay. And somebody commented to me privately about 5-mile-per-hour speed limits on sidewalks, and is something like that technically possible to limit speeds on sidewalks?
So there is, right now, as it relates to any sort of shared device, the maximum speed is 15. And within this permit for scooters, as I stated earlier, we have the first time ride at 8 miles per hour. We can, in certain areas that, let's say, have been deemed as highly populated or whatever, to say we're going to cordon off this area, geofence it, right, and lower this. The device has to go at a slower speed, or it cannot ride there at all. Now, is it possible to do that on all city sidewalks? The technology does not exist to do that at this point. There's been some attempts to. There's some different technologies there that have attempted to kind of show that the device is either on sidewalk or not. When you get inside of areas where there's tall buildings and canyons like that, it's difficult to kind of maintain that. That may change in the future. We may be closer to that, but at this point, that's not a thing that is technically possible in a very consistent way to determine whether something is actually on a sidewalk or not.
Okay, one little quick one. When are the other two companies expected to seek their permits or deploy?
Both of the other two companies are working through right now quickly on everything that we require from them in terms of signing up our indemnification clause, which is one of the strongest ones in the entire nation. Same thing with our insurance that's required. It's one of the strongest ones in the entire nation. And as long as they can comply with that, and as long as they can go through that, then they'll be allowed to come in as a vendor. If they, for whatever reason, can't, then we'll select the next one that came in behind them in line. In terms of when they get here, it'll be within the next, let's say, 30 to 60 days. Right now, it's kind of up in the air in terms of that. We know that both of the other two are working very, very hard to make sure that they can get to the city as fast as possible.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Yes, I do see that Tracy asked a question about when are the other two companies expected?
Yeah, we just got that one.
Oh, sorry, I must have gotten distracted. And that, so Deb, Deb, you're raising your hand and you put in the chat. You want to ask the question?
You do it.
All right. We will get ready for our next speaker.
All right, I will ask my question.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
I do want to, before we do that, I just want to apologize once again for some of the issues we had at the start of the meeting, being a little flustered and not properly introducing Stefan Winkler, who is the strategic advisor at the Seattle Department of Transportation, and as you probably gathered, is the program manager for the scooter share. There is the website. You can learn more information. Go ahead, Deb.
Okay, just to clarify, and it's a yes or no question, the standing or sitting scooters can use the West Seattle Low Bridge pedestrian bike lane, or they can't? I guess it would be a yes or no somehow.
Yes, they can.
Yes, they can use can they use the driving lane? That's where you shake your head no.
Yeah, on the lower bridge, anything that's 25 miles per hour and under on the road, they can use, or they can use a footpath or a bike lane.
25 miles speed limit or less?
That's right.
So the low bridge is signed at 25 miles an hour. So you're saying that scooters can use the low bridge in the driving lane?
Oh, I see what she's asking. So, Stefan, could scooters go over the lower bridge with the existing restrictions? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking, can they use the driving lane of the low bridge, or do they have to be in the bike lane?
Well, they're more than likely to be in the bike lane, because that's a protected lane that's there specifically and where they're going to access it. Not sure how folks would end up deciding to go just onto the main driving lane. But because
I'm going to suggest that you make that super clear, because there's a lot of people who have been asking to use their motorcycles or maybe their Vespas on the low bridge, and they've been told that they cannot. So I really encourage you to make it super clear so that the scooters, when the company starts flooding West Seattle with them because they want to help us out, make sure that they know where they can and cannot go on that low bridge, because that's a huge point of discussion right now. Not discussion, contention.
Good to know.
Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yep. I appreciate you out there.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving forward.
Thanks, Michael.
Before we go to our next guest, a quick pause, or ads as I call them. The Census 2020 drive ends September 30th. It's not too late to count. If you haven't already given your information for the census, please do so right now. The 10 minutes you spend doing this will benefit our state, our city, And yes, even your local neighborhood for the next 10 years it determines all sorts of funding and demographics based on your local census tract, which is even smaller than your neighborhood in a lot of cases. Federal funding, legislative representation, and so much more. With the economic recession, our local governments are out of funds, so we will need federal help for many things, like our bridges, parks, and highways, disasters, etc. You can log on to 2020census.gov to answer the 7 questions online, or you can call in at 1-844-330-2020. And so if you haven't done that, please feel free to go ahead and do that right after this meeting, or maybe during the meeting on the webpage. And we will move ahead. Lauren, hopefully you're unmuted. We got a conversation with West Seattle Bike Connections about some of their concerns about the City of Seattle scooter and bike share programs and some of the other things going on. And we're happy to have Lauren Schwartz with us.
Hello. Yeah, glad to be here. I was just asked to represent some of the thoughts that came from the West Seattle Bike Connections group around scooters and some recommendations that we made for the scooter share program. And I can just give a brief sort of overview of what that is. I could pull up a slide here. I'll offer it if you want to enable share screen or screen sharing. I just basically took our letter and put it in a slide, if that's helpful. But otherwise, I can just talk through it. It's just a series of bullets.
Sure.
I don't know.
What I will do is make you a co-host so you can go ahead and share.
Okay, let me attempt this. Okay, great. Can you see this okay?
Yeah. Can you make it any bigger? There you go.
Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so just these were the recommendations we made. And I'll just walk through them quickly. So we suggested rules and automated solutions be instituted to prevent scooters from behaving badly. That was outlined for parking. I'll ask about another way to use geofencing in a moment. But we also recommended that scooters should be primarily used as a source of transportation. And that may seem obvious, but in contrast to using them as a primary source of recreation, which we've seen in other cities and maybe in ways that weren't so desirable, but I can go into that in a moment. So what we're saying is we'd like to see them used for short hops to bus stops within West Seattle, South Park, and White Center, business districts, parks, libraries, schools, and make them accessible at junctions, to and from junctions, and just basically, using them as a mode of transportation to get to other forms of transportation for longer trips, or use for point-to-point for shorter ones. So we also mentioned, once you get out of West Seattle, also having the ability to use those scooters. We're saying that they should be discouraged on sidewalks, but if and when they are, they should behave like bikes do. We are saying, and this probably is will be the most controversial thing, is that we do not allow scooters via geofencing or GPS in parks or on park trails. The example given along Alki Beach. And I'll come back to that one because I think it deserves a little bit more explanation, but quickly I'll just finish these up. We want the scooter company to offer an equity program, which it sounds like they have, and there was a lot of discussion about making that as easy as possible for the scooter users. And then we suggested a seated scooter, so it's great to see that wheels solution was offered. Safety training, which it sounds like there is, and then sort of a final point, not to be too cynical, but there was sort of widespread belief that these scooter providers and their business models were not sustainable. the economics don't make sense. So if they're going to collapse or, you know, go out of business, we don't want to be left holding the bag, or we want the city to be prepared for that, have a contingency plan for that eventuality. So that, I'll get back to this, what might be a little more controversial is not using them along in parks or on park trails and along Alki Beach. This was based on some experience, firsthand experience that people in the group had, as well as just sort of thinking it through about what Alki Beach is like today without scooter share and potentially dozens, if not hundreds, of scooters descending upon that area. It's already kind of chaotic. It's already a challenge to ride your bike down the designated bike path that's there, and I don't even ride on the bike path. I ride in the street in the designated area for cycling for that reason. But the first-hand experience, and I'll give my own in this case, is the difference between Venice Beach and Santa Monica, or the difference between Venice Beach and Manhattan Beach. Manhattan Beach and Santa Monica restrict scooter use, and they do that by geofencing. So if you're coming north out of Venice and you get to Santa Monica, your scooter stops working. You can ride scooters in Santa Monica if you go up off the beach, off the Strand, and ride it in the city. They allow that. But on the beach, they disable that. It's a no ride zone. This is something that talking to the scooter vendor Spin and working with them, that's typical. Other cities do this in parks. They limit scooter use. So we just seeing sort of the chaos and a lesson that Santa Monica kind of learned. We'd like to, you know, take their learnings and apply them. They initially allowed scooters on the beach, and then they eliminated them or they limited them. They do offer bike share on their beach, which, you know, it seems maybe counterintuitive, but we do that now in Alki and it's manageable. But what they saw when they added scooters, it got crazy. So they limited that, and that's what we proposed. And that would be my question for Stefan, that, you know, we talked about geofencing parking areas and the ability to do sidewalks. I understand that's hard in a downtown area, detecting the difference between a bike lane and a sidewalk. But certainly in an area like Alki Beach or Lincoln Park, you could detect that, and there's that level of control. Do you have places, Myrtle Edwards Beach, are there, or Myrtle Edwards Park, the sculpture park, are you limiting the use of scooters in these park areas and on certain paths? I'm not sure he's still on the Did Stefan jump off?
Oh, he's there.
Okay.
This wasn't allowed to speak for a moment. Great question. Yes, we have the ability to do areas that you can cordon off. You know, for instance, like Alpine Trail, for instance. It's definitely possible. I think the one, just to kind of give the alternative view, reasoning why we might caution on this, and pardon me if you're hearing an echo, I'm hearing an echo right now. So from a point of equity, SDOT really wants to provide all people who ride a scooter or device, bike, the same access regardless of whether they are only able to rent it through like a, you know, for instance, Lime's program that's 5 rides per day, 30 minutes per ride for free, So if if they're only able to do that, we don't want to limit their ability to do the same thing that folks who are able to just buy their own personal device and ride along the trail regardless. Also understanding what you're saying in terms of fearing and being concerned about an onslaught of devices that just suddenly end up on the trail. And so I just, it's something that we have looked at the, this was, I think, part of the letter that was sent. This is one, and I think everything else that y'all suggested, we're following it. This is the only one that we're just want to have some caution on right now, and also just make sure that we're being just very cognizant of being equitable in terms of how we're approaching folks with coming from different economic areas. So that's just the only thing that I'll say about that.
Okay, yeah, just in response to that, and we did exchange emails about that specific argument. The people on Alki Beach are not, it's not a low income area. This is equity we appreciate, and that's why we've recommended that these get distributed in some of the neighborhoods that we recommended, and we think that that's important for these scooters to over-index in lower income areas. But in terms of not being able to afford scooters or transportation, Alki Beach is not probably a high density of low income residents, or that's the sort of the argument against that we should worry about equity, but we should also recognize where sort of low income where lower income residents are living, and that's just not an area. So we felt that a lot of the residents who live along Alki Beach have access to bikes or cars, and they use them already. The scooters don't benefit that neighborhood that much. So anyway, I'll just say, if the city has made that decision, if I don't know how to monitor that, but it would be nice if they were open to reconsidering it or reviewing it, because it's sort of, this is not a lesson we need to relearn based on what I've seen in other cities.
Yeah.
All right, we got time for one or two questions. I see some things coming in on the chat, so while Kate looks at those, Mark, I see you've had your hand up, so if you needed to ask a question, now would be a good time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I see scooters and electric bikes as pretty much just a different element of the same animal. And so if you're going to restrict the scooters, I think you need to be looking at the electric bikes, which I think is an issue we haven't really addressed yet. As a monopilot bicyclist and being passed quickly by these people on electric bikes, it could, I think we're entering a new zone here, and some of these trails are just, electric bikes and scooters need to be treated the same. So if you want to restrict the scooters, restrict the electric bikes.
Yeah, it's just not what we saw in other cities. Venice being an example of that, where they allow electric bikes, or Santa Monica, where they allow electric bikes but not scooters. And just having experience riding with both of them on my bike, there's much more of a predictable pattern that you see from a passing electric cyclist versus a electric scooter that you're passing or they're passing you. It's a little bit more erratic, but that's my personal experience. So I respect that you may think about them the same way.
Kate, do we have some things in the window?
I think the chat is mostly discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Is SDOT regulating what happens in city parks, on trails in city parks?
Yes, we are. In fact, and I do want to name that right now, as you know, we have Safe Streets, okay, area, and that's kind of the area that we're mainly concerned about in terms of making sure that there's access to that area. As it relates to parks specifically, currently there will be no riding of scooters within multi-use trails within parks. So that's something that will not be allowed any on the sidewalks or trails or pathways within the actual parks.
Can you make the distinction between City Park and Alki Beach Park?
So that's why I called it earlier, the use of the safe, healthy streets along the areas. That obviously is not part of parks. And as I'm talking to you right now, I'm looking at just checking here at this site here, and clearly we have Alki Beach Park is part of the parks there. So the distinction that I'm making is where it comes to park property, Seattle park property, Seattle, the scooters will not be allowed. When it comes to safe, healthy streets, then scooters will be allowed there, or any other type of city right of way that aligns with that.
So you're saying that scooters will be allowed along Alki Point, but from say 63rd West around the corner past Marination, they will not be allowed?
I wish I could pinpoint it in the way that you have. I can't, but I can just say that they will not be allowed on park. If that's within the park region, then you're correct.
Some of Alki is actually on street level. The bike lanes are on street level, and then for part of it, it's
dips down,
in the park. Yeah.
I think this is the concern that we definitely are hearing a lot to the coalition. It isn't so much, some people want scooters here or there, but really what we're hearing across the board is just real concern with how is somebody going to know when it's okay and when it's not, when they're in a park or not, when they're on a trail that's a bike path or a trail that's not a bike path, and a lot of confusion, especially when we come back around to the summer and there might be a lot of tourists coming in and using these things who are unfamiliar with the area. And so we certainly hope that's something that SDOT is going to continue to look at. I want to make sure to keep us moving. So I want to thank our most recent guest, thank Stefan for sticking around, as well as thank Lauren. If folks want to know more information about West Seattle Bike Connections, please visit their website, which is really easy to remember because it's just westseattlebikeconnections.org. We've got about 15 minutes left. As we'll skip past old business, which is not all that important at the moment. As I told folks at the top of the meeting, we're going to take the last few minutes of our meeting here to have what sort of would be generally more of a board discussion, but we wanted to make sure that any of our members who wanted to participate in that could join us. So if you're interested in sticking around, great. We'd appreciate any input you want to offer. And if you want to take off now, we also understand that as well. And we appreciate you joining us this evening, despite all of our interesting technical difficulties.